welcome back to Laurence McKenna channel, where Liverpool have just beaten Brentford 2-0 at home on their opening game of the season, and there is a lot to unpack. I am in a slightly moodily lit hotel room this evening, which maybe changes the vibe of the video a bit, but doesn't overall change the upward feeling / trajectory on this channel, though I am still a little bit nervous about next week's game and kind of what happens when teams begin to think of ways to counter Slot. But I want to talk about some of the positives from the game against Brentford. And obviously, with it being the first opening home game of the season, we were there with Nike, it was lovely. Thank you very much to those guys for hosting us. But the main thing that I took away from it was Slot's ideas, Slot's tactics, and Slot's training sessions, the gut that Liverpool play with, from this part here, is being reshaped, redeveloped. There is different movement within the team. There is actually different understanding. There's definitely a much more fluid idea of where players stand on the pitch, and the players seem to be really enjoying it. Not least the creatives within the team of Trent Alexander-Arnold, who literally looked like he was standing at centre forward at one point during the game, played a ball and then just ran out that position. And slightly confusing. Stephen and Tries and I kind of sat next to each other and exchanged notes as to why it happened, but I guess players just end up in certain positions, and I guess Slot is kind of encouraging them to explore the way that they move around the field right now, rather than being as set as they were even just 1 week ago against Ipswich. And, I'm not against it. It feels really positive, along with the fact that the team do seem to be I don't think it's about freedom versus like a set movement that they have. I think there certainly are set plays that this Liverpool team have and set ways that they attack the game. But there are times where you look at the fluidity of the side, you look at how much fun they're having with it, with the movement and the ball and the triangles and the 1-2s and the build-up. And there is like a certain joie de vivre to what they are trying to achieve, what it is that they are, the shapes they're making out on the field. And the fun that then translates into the stands with is quite infectious. Now, that's not to say that, it's the same as in last season or whatever. I don't want to keep referring to last season, but I think a lot of people are going to use that as a yardstick. It's not going to be like some carnival atmosphere instantly. In fact, the first home game of the season, it sort of feels like the fans are kind of easing themselves back into it. Brentford, it's not a hard game to get up for, but it's like what is this to us? We're still kind of working out what our expectations should be as a fan base. Are we in a title race here because we beat Ipswich and then Brentford? Or are we expecting top 4? Are we expecting a redevelopment season? What are the parameters to judge this Slot team by? And I think we can work a lot of that out. So far, they've been dominating games. Despite the fact we played Brentford and Ipswich, you can still judge us by the fact that we've had the most XG in the league over those 2 games. I think it was like 4.56 or close to 4.7 over those 2 games. So close to those amount of goals. And then on the other side of that, they've also got the least conceded opportunities in terms of XG as well. Whilst it's not just purely XG that we want to talk about, that is a positive metric. And I get it. I think that's partly because we've not really played teams with some incredible attacking quality or teams that are overly, I would say, stacked at the top of their side. And it's given Liverpool not a hiatus, but a bit of a leeway to be able to play with it. You can definitely see that Konate and Van Dijk look so comfortable against the opposition. I know there are a couple of times where I think there was a weird pass from Gravenberch and we had to make a recovery, or there was a weird pass out to the fullback, or someone recovered it in the passing area between the midfield sitting 2 and the back 2. And for a second, maybe Liverpool looked a little panicked, but Alisson just seems to fall on these things and you instantly feel reassured. Anfield just kind of claps and Liverpool are instantly breaking away. There also seems to be a bit more fluidity as to how Liverpool are moving the ball down the field now. Times where Alisson rolls the ball out, times where he plays out to Andy Robertson or Trent at fullback, and one of those 2 players progresses the ball extremely quickly. Salah and Diaz, great outlets, though also interesting to see Jota and Diaz swapping throughout the game and trying to confuse the fullbacks. Definitely a tactic that Slot has been working on. And then, of course, on top of that, you've also got what I would consider to be a really solid midfield performance, say, from Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai. There were times where, of course, I think you can criticise any of these guys. Like I said, Gravenberch had a weird short pass, / he slipped over once. I'd say there are a couple of times where McAllister was caught in weird positions, but that's kind of what his role is to get in awkward positions and then work his way out of them. And there are a couple of times where they had some beautiful flicks around corners, those kind of things. You can see these 3 are like a glue type. We're going to rotate in terms of shape and mould and it just works. I think against more quality sides who'll pin Liverpool back, who'll try and take one of those three out of the rotation, we will see a difference in how Liverpool play and will be tested as a side. But when playing a team like Brentford, you can clearly see the ideas and the ideals that Slot is trying to get this team to play with. And frankly, Anfield felt very appreciative of it. It wasn't like they were going crazy for it, though there were a couple of times where there was clearly a passage of play. There was like one time where Salah had 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 pass, and the stadium was like, oh, this is really something else. And you see those little moments open up. But at the same time, I think they're still learning what it is that they're looking for. And actually, the control and the pace that Liverpool play at now is very different to the way that Anfield is previously used to. And what I'd say is we've kind of transferred some of the anxiousness or kind of edge of our seat type play that was there last season or even the season before into, right, okay, we're going to try and control this. Even when there is a bit of a counter-attack, there are times where it will end up at Liverpool counter-attack and pushing that team back and then going back and preferring possession, basically, but also shape over, let's just get down the other end and score, which I do need to talk about. Liverpool's goals, and especially Diaz's goal, it was a very high-quality move, but that was a very high-quality counter-attack. That's in contrast to Salah's. Again, like, I'm still trying to come up with a bit of a term for it. It feels like a transition goal, even when Liverpool are in possession, which makes it feel like it sort of came out of nowhere, but it didn't come out of nowhere. You can feel Liverpool pushing for these goals. There are times where it's like, just wide, post, just wide. Right, we made the goalkeeper make a save from a couple of yards out, and you can feel Liverpool just slowly edging closer to the goal, and the belief within the side seems to go up as well. It is like they're ratcheting something up to just push the pressure on the opposition. And obviously that's very satisfying. It's a bit of a reminder closer to like the 21-22 season where there was a bit more control, where it was a little bit more relaxed, where it wasn't like, let's just blow these guys away and have a great sense of satisfaction. It is more of this, we will press, and if we don't win that press, then we'll win in the next press, or the next press, or they'll win something there. There is a real selflessness within the team that is working really well at the moment. That's not to say there weren't some sloppy passes. There was a time where Salah did a sloppy pass and had to win the ball back in midfield, and you can tell he was annoyed about it. There were a couple of times where a couple of balls went wide and people were sort of complaining to each other. But apart from that, I'm still waiting for the test. And I've got another video that will be titled Liverpool Will Lose. I'm signaling, I'm giving you a little indication here. At some point, we need to address when Liverpool hit some hardship. Because at the moment, it is this kind of quite smooth, I don't even want to call it a honeymoon period. It doesn't feel like a honeymoon at this point. It still feels like Liverpool are exploring what the relationship with this new team should be and whether we should kind of be happy about the lack of investment or the sales and the building up into the future, or whether we should be like, okay, should we not worry about this in some capacity? Should we be slightly concerned that Slot or whoever doesn't have all the pieces? But it does seem like there are some pieces that are falling into place, or pieces that are being coached into place. Ryan Gravenberch is definitely one of those players. I definitely feel like we still maybe like one midfield body. I think there are times where I think this is great now at the beginning of the season, but give us a couple of weeks when either Szoboszlai, McAllister or Gravenberch needs to be rotated out. And you can see when Ando comes on, the movement of the ball does change slightly. Harvey Elliott, of course, and it is a difference in movement out on the field, but he replaced Salah today, which is different to replacing a direct midfielder. Though he was a midfielder coming on, he's not therefore like a midfielder. He was a midfielder replacing an attacker, and it's a difference in shape for the team. It's a difference in ball movement. It certainly leads to these slightly shorter crosses, slightly more intimate passing than the Salah hookup, but it works. Of course, we should talk about Mo Salah. Mo Salah went off as I think about the 70th, 80th minute today, got a standing ovation as he went off the field in the same way Jota and Diaz both did as well, because people appreciated what they put in. But what I would say with Mo Salah is Mo Salah seems so vital to this team right now, and his nous, his hookup, his intelligence out on the field is really showing. There is clearly an aura to this guy. The opposition are afraid of playing Mo Salah, and it's incredibly satisfying to watch. Not only do they stand off him, but when they do try and get into him, then he's very good at positioning himself to win the ball back. He's very good at hooking up with another player and then winning the ball back as a pair, or just maintaining possession. But he's also really good at this kind of like, I see a shape here, I'm going to move into it. Diaz maybe slightly more stilted. He kind of does that thing that Diaz did where he like shifts and then shifts past the player, shifts and then shifts past the player. He never quite works that shooting angle, and Brentford just seemed very good at like slowly shifting him away from the goal. But it is a great way of moving the play around. And again, when Brentford move into that, there are gaps in between that get filled in. What I'd say is there's not a lack of a striker. Jota, again, I think was very good today, but he didn't have the open chances that he had against Ipswich. We still have a very high XG. We still have a very reasonable return for what it is that we wanted. But when Núñez came on, it felt a little more like we were trying to force it a little bit more, and I think that'll still be the case for a little while. You could see in some of the changes, Núñez and Gakpo came on as like another unit of attackers alongside and just behind Harvey Elliott in terms of minutes, and it did shift. I'd be interested to see Núñez start a game. I'd be interested to see Gakpo start a game. I'd be interested to see why those guys don't. It might be a rotation thing, it might be a minutes thing, it might be a Copa America thing, it might be a Euros. There's lots of different reasons why those guys would not immediately start in this lineup right now, especially fitness-wise. But you can see that the core of this team has a good understanding at this point, and they are really enjoying exploring that understanding, and that is satisfying as a fan base to watch. My main takeaway is also, Slot is very calm on the sidelines. His feedback seems very minimal. I'd imagine there's a lot more going on in the dressing room. I'd imagine there are players who have had very intensive briefings before that. But you can see, he sends a couple of players out to warm up. They get back. They get a very minimal briefing, not from him, obviously. And then as they go out in the field, just give them some last words, kind of manager-esque. It's not, it's no different to what I'd have expected from any other new manager coming in. But it seems like they are very focused on the exact task it is that they have to achieve out there. And that, I've got to admit that the tweaking that he's doing is very different to the previous generation of tweaking, and seems like a very precise way of adjusting a game. You can see players almost enjoying the observations that he's making, almost enjoying the tweaks that he's making. And sometimes you can kind of enjoy I enjoy watching him watching the game, because it doesn't seem like he's reacting with this kind of performative element to him. Obviously every manager is performative, but he's not reacting with this the mouth open, those kind of things when the cameras focus on him, though his stance is still very strong and he has a very kind of manager energy to him. What I enjoy is watching him reading the game and then giving those small tactical instructions, which don't seem so broad. They seem like very pocketed. It's very sort of, if you do this thing in this specific place, his hands are very precise. His communication seems very clear with the players, which is obviously what we were speaking about with Jarell Quansah a week ago now. And as a fan, I enjoy watching him. It's almost in trying to work out what it is that he is thinking, what it is that he is watching, because he's not always watching the ball. And it seems a little bit like he's kind of like, right, how do we unlock these guys? How am I going to work out what it is that I can tweak or change, or what is it that I can watch within my own team I know is going to unfold that we can then chase? And that, I think, is a real positive. It feels a little unknowable. He doesn't seem to have the kind of knowable face that some other managers do. I find Mikel Arteta quite unknowable in terms of a lot of what he says, but then there are people who've worked out ways to read him more recently. I'm not sure we've obviously seen Slot rattled yet. We know what Pep's idiosyncrasies are when he's rattled. We know what Arteta's are. Always knew what Klopp's were. We know what managers are like when they're rattled. We've not seen that yet with Slot. But you can see he's trying to build this aura or build this persona, an idea around him, and I appreciate that. I think it shows a great level of self-control. I think there is still an element of, it's not hangover, but it's kind of layover from what we previously had, which I think is unavoidable. And I think there are people who want to avoid that, but I also think it's probably just worth naming it and then you let it pass rather than sort of letting it float around in the air. And I don't really have a problem with it. I'm very fond of the previous era, and so I don't really feel that awkward talking about it. But I know some people in the comments have kind of been a bit more like, oh, don't stop mentioning this, stop talking about that. Obviously the club won't want to always be framing everything by previous. They want to frame everything by now. I get that. So yeah, I enjoyed watching today. A very different atmosphere. Felt slightly more like we were easing back into it. But overall, the system works. And again, I come back to the fighting analogy, the jab, the jab, the jab, and then they're catching them as they're moving away, or they're working out the opposition and then working out what their rhythm is, picking that rhythm apart, and it feels very rhythmic after a while. You can actually also see the players kind of enjoying that play almost, not with their food, but with their opponent. There was a point where like the cockiness of Szoboszlai and Trent came out when there was like 3 or 4 very quick passes. It was like pass, 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 pass. And they were almost just getting their passing stats up. It felt very weird to watch because it felt a little un-us-like at one point. And I think there is a kind of, I don't want to call it arrogance, it's a confidence, but it feels a little bit like an arrogance that there is a swagger around this team with. And there is an energy that seems to be underlying the play, but it doesn't seem as obvious as in some other teams or in some other eras. And I think there's still like a nervous patience and anticipation of what it is that we're building. And that's satisfying because it feels, you can feel it. It's very tangible. Anyway, I'll be doing some tactical breakdowns later in the week, obviously, about this team. I want to talk a little bit about Van Dijk. I think Van Dijk and Konate deserve a lot of credit, but I also think Alisson does as well. He stepped very seamlessly back in. I love the comments where he's talking about, I see myself here for a long time. Even if he doesn't, even if he isn't, whatever it is, he spoke about, it's about being solid for the fans. It's about putting in a solid outward face on things. And he spoke about Giorgio Mamardashvili coming in and possibly the excitement he felt around that, the way the club had spoken to him. It seems like very clear communication from him, and I'm really appreciative of that as a fan, because I guess I was sort of like, oh, it's a big change. Alisson's been a huge figure for us. He's saved us a lot of goals, but he's also created a lot. He's been a big figure in the dressing room. It's just interesting to hear him speak, and I love the way he's just seamlessly worked his way back in. He seems very comfortable in this system. I'll be interested to see if United press him next week, try and make him a little bit uncomfortable. But he's a very natural goalkeeper, and it always leads me to feeling quite at home in watching him. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching the video. Let me know your feedback in the comments below. We'll be addressing all of this tomorrow and more throughout the week. And of course, if you've not already hit subscribe, then hit it. There's a Patreon down there. There's a Discord as well for people to get into, and I will be in both of those throughout the week. I'll see you guys in a while. Much love. Bye.